viewers, I am DS Psychologist and welcome to another episode on Channel NITT. Many people who just got to know about the MBTI will have a very stereotypical view of the ENTJ. So for many people, the ENTJ is a tyrant, is a very bossy, directive individual. But in reality, the ENTJ is not exactly like that. So for our viewers who have been watching the channel episodes, even if you are not an ENTJ, you should by now be more familiar with what a real-life ENTJ is like. If we were to evaluate the stereotypical, prototypical ENTJ, most would agree that this individual has low EQ. But in reality, does the ENTJ also have low EQ? This is the topic of our episode today. Before we begin today's episode, I would like to make a clarification. First of all, there are a lot of people who have a misconception about EQ. Many people think that being sociable, having a lot of friends, knowing when to say the right things is a mark of a person who has high emotional quotient. Of course, this is a very narrow way of looking at emotional quotient or EQ. Another common misconception that many people have is that people with high IQ tend to have low EQ. So actually, IQ and EQ are not polar opposites and they do not fall on the same continuum. Therefore, a person can have high IQ and high EQ at the same time. So now let's get to the question, does the generic ENTJ have a high IQ or a low EQ? So to answer this question, we must first answer another question, and that is, what does EQ comprise of? Some research proposed that EQ is comprised of 4 components, but for this episode, we are going to use the 5-component theory. So using the model by Goleman, we have 5 different components making up EQ. Okay, let's talk about the first element, and that would be empathy. So in one of our previous episodes, we have already discussed empathy. This is, in a very simple way, the ability to put yourself onto another person's shoes. And in that episode, I explained that the TE user, ENTJ, is able to empathize.
What did you do with your shoes?
I don't know.
Now, because TE has this ability to think from all sorts of perspectives, including the other person's perspective, so it is very possible for the ENTJ to be able to practice empathy. On top of that, they have NI, introverted intuition, which can allow them to tap into the other person's collective consciousness. So for this subcomponent, I am going to say that the ENTJ is moderate in terms of empathy. But unless you are a social moron, everybody should at least have moderate empathy, right? You don't go to a funeral and make a lot of noise, laugh. That is totally not empathetic.
Prevent the dog from barking with a juicy bone.
So in that regard, the ENTJ has very high social awareness. They know under which social circumstances what they should do. However, social awareness is not a component of EQ, but self-awareness is. So we go to our second component, self-awareness. So self-awareness, according to definition, is the ability to recognize and understand moods, emotions and drives and their effect on themselves, the person themselves and on others. So self-awareness is also the ability to monitor your own feelings and correctly identify and label these feelings. So in this regard, the ENTJ should be low. So while different ENTJs may have different levels of self-awareness, but for this ENTJ, I would say that the level of self-awareness is towards low. Slightly higher than low, lower than moderate. So in a few of our previous episodes, we talked about the ENTJ's inability to feel. The ENTJ is not very good with emotions. So as an ENTJ, I find it very hard to distinguish between some emotions because I cannot feel them, or when I feel them, it seems to be very complex. Like, am I angry and frustrated at the same time? Or am I frustrated and irritated at the same time? Or am I angry and irritated at the same time? That is very confusing. Okay, let's move on to the third component of EQ, and that is self-regulation. So there are 2 parts to self-regulation. The first part is concerned with the ability to control and redirect negative, disruptive moods. So it is possible for an ENTJ to have a very strong emotional impulse. What do they do with this? Do they just unleash? So if you are able to control that impulse need to have an outburst, then your self-regulation will definitely be high. I realized that in my younger days, my self-regulation is much lower. But as I grow older, as an ENTJ, I am regulating myself much better. So I would say now, as a mature ENTJ, it would be moderate to high. Oh, I can really endure now. When I was younger, I just unleashed. This is true. So another component of self-regulation is the ability to suspend judgment and delay action. So when you hear something, you don't immediately act. Because self-regulation is the ability to control yourself from being impulsive, making impulsive action, having impulsive thoughts. In that regard, I would say that the ENTJ is moderate again. This is very conservative, okay? So when I mean moderate, it just means that for the ENTJ, this ability is not low. So we have a fourth component of EQ, and that is motivation. And when we are talking about motivation in this case, it's definitely intrinsic motivation, the drive to go beyond external rewards. So in the face of the lack of external rewards, can one still be motivated? In the case of the ENTJ, definitely yes. So for this component, high for the ENTJ. So I can totally identify with this. For example, I'm doing YouTube and it is not monetizing, but I find that I am still very motivated to do because I have a commitment to myself and a commitment to the viewers. Okay, let's come to the fifth component of EQ, and that is social skills. Look at the way I laugh. Seems a little bit guilty. Well, I think in a lot of time, the ENTJ may not have very good social skills. So when it comes to social skills, many people would say that the ENTJ does not have very good social skills. So in a few of my previous episodes, I've also explained that the ENTJ doesn't like to make friends easily because they are very selective. On top of that, the ENTJ can really be very bossy, especially in the eyes of others. This is because the ENTJ knows exactly what they want and they do not want to waste time because of how they value efficiency. So as a result, a lot of times social relationships are sacrificed for efficiency or for results. Another example why the ENTJ does not have good social skills is the ENTJ usually does not exercise tact, although they can. Sometimes they just want to be very direct, they don't want to decorate or polish their words. So this means that sometimes when the ENTJ talks to you, it appears very curt and offensive. But this is just the way we are. Another problem with the ENTJ is that they tend to talk down. What I mean is that it's like, okay, I am the A student, I am now talking to you, I am teaching you. Instead of like, I am your friend, I am sharing this with you. So it gives people an unpleasant feeling because it seems as if whenever the ENTJ talks, they are just talking down. Unfortunately, sometimes this for the ENTJ is very subconscious or unconscious. They are not aware of this. Okay, so this is why the ENTJ sometimes gives people this air of arrogance. They look just very arrogant, bossy, aloof. Yeah. This does not help in social skills at all, especially when we meet an F-type who really needs to be lovey-dovey. We are not. So in this regard, I think we might be classified as low in terms of social skills. But of course, we can morph ourselves, and under normal circumstances, we can know what the appropriate things to do would be when it comes to a social context. It's just that sometimes we're just too lazy, we can't be bothered, we value efficiency more. Talking about which, don't expect too much of an ENTJ in social situations. They know what things to do, but they are not bothered with niceties. Okay, so compounded together with the 5 different components, if we are to obtain a composite score for the ENTJ, I would say that the ENTJ will still lie in the moderate region. So is it possible that the ENTJ has low EQ? So maybe for younger ENTJs, yes, because they just got out in the society, they just want to demonstrate that they know a lot of things. So it is possible that they may lack more tact. So as an ENTJ grows older, they are more able to internalize and realize that it is very important for them to develop the social component of themselves as well. Okay, I hope that you have enjoyed this episode as well. If you have not subscribed, do consider subscribing so that we can bring you more ENTJ and MBTI. Okay, I'm going to sign off now and I'll see you in my next episode. Goodbye!